I remember him threatening me, telling me things like, if you tell anybody, your dad's never going to come back to Guatemala to come pick you up. Maybe it was because I was a younger cousin. Maybe it was because I was more vulnerable. But he targeted me. My name is Sylvia. I'm 33 years old, and I am from Guatemala. My father worked very, very hard to bring us on to the United States, to give us a better life, education, and to have a better life than he did. So we did struggle a lot as we were children. My dad moved back and forth from the United States to Guatemala so he can provide for the family. We lived with my grandparents from my mother's side. And my mom, she's one of 21 children. That's how many children my grandparents had. And in the Latin American community is very accustomed for all the siblings to live together, even as they grow up and have their own children within their families. We just tend to live in a large cluster of people. We are also very accustomed for them to leave the older cousins to kind of watch over the younger cousins as, the women go out and shop, do whatever they need to do to prepare for the meals while the men come home from work. And I think it was that vulnerability right there that made it a little bit difficult. I remember being about, I can't even remember the age, maybe it was about 6 or 7 when it started. And my dad was living in the United States at that time, and it was my mom and all the girls. My brother wasn't born yet. And when my mom used to go out with my other aunts to go shopping, they left my older cousins there to stay with us. And it was this one specific cousin. He was kind of raised by my grandparents. He kind of went back and forth between his mom, and then the dad wasn't around. But it was him specifically that kind of targeted me. Maybe it was because I was a younger cousin. Maybe it was because I was more vulnerable. Maybe it was because, I don't know. But he targeted me, and it was almost like it was very precise, or he kind of mapped it out, because he would only do it when he knew all of the aunts were going to be gone out of the house, and even when the grandparents were gone. I remember it happening where he would take me into one of the other rooms, and I call it rape now, but he abused me, and he was so much older than me. He was in his teen years, and I was, like I said, maybe 6 or 7, maybe even 8 years old, and he did it back and forth. I remember him threatening me, telling me things like, if you tell anybody, your dad's never going to come back to Guatemala to come pick you up. Or I remember him telling me that, that I wasn't pretty. That's why when I was never going to get married. And when it comes to your culture in the Hispanic community, it is a big deal for you to one day grow up and be married and have kids. That's what you kind of look forward to. And as such a young person, or I was a kid. I was just a little child. I was scared. And, I thought, well, he's my older cousin. He knows what he's doing. You're supposed to respect your elders, which is something that they push. So when he would abuse me, in my mind, I thought this is normal. It didn't feel right. I knew it wasn't okay, but somehow if he's an older cousin and he's telling me that this is okay, it just must be okay. As a child, especially when you're so young and vulnerable, and I like to use my daughter as an example. She's only 3 years old, but if I tell her that the sky is green, she's going to agree with me because I'm the adult and she's trusting me that I'm telling her the right stuff, or I'm teaching her the right way. I guess it's that way when I was younger. You just assume because an adult tells you something that it's the right thing, or it's the right thing to do. But I remember him doing things to me, and they didn't feel good to me, but he would tell me, he would kind of try to convince me that they felt good, that this was normal, that this is going to make me happy, this is what I needed. And he started off very, very gentle at first, almost trying to win me over as my cousin, trying to give me prizes here and there, give me a piece of chocolate, give me some candy. one of the things that we were never allowed to drink when we were younger was soda pop. We couldn't drink soda. So every once in a while, he'd sneak some soda just to me, and he would say it's because I was so special. But then the second he pretty much brought my confidence down and started abusing me and raping me. I call it rape because I was so young, this is not okay. The second that happened, and it's almost like he got what he wanted out of me, then he started being the complete opposite. He would treat me really mean, constantly tell me I was ugly, constantly tell me that I would smell, constantly kind of bring me down, and I guess in the back of my mind, I started believing it. Yeah. And then I remember I was in high school at the time. And I remember my mother telling me that we were going to have a family member that was going to move with us to the United States because he needed to raise some money. He was trying to get his life together. And then I remember coming home from high school, and it was that cousin that had, raped me when I was a kid. And I guess I just couldn't understand why he would think it's okay to move in with my family. Obviously, a lot of the memories started coming back, and I couldn't stand him. I hated him, and my mom could just not understand. And, and I almost felt guilt about the whole situation because as I got older, I thought, well, maybe it was my fault. Maybe I asked for it. I was really young when I started being sexually active, and I guess I always just wanted to feel loved. I didn't. I got pregnant when I was in high school, and I remember telling my mom first, and she was a little bit more understanding than my dad was. And I remember telling my dad, and I felt like disappointment towards him. Like I felt like almost like I did something bad, And I know premarital sex is kind of frowned upon. He not only here in the United States but in Guatemala. But things happen for a reason, and I know. And I guess I'm grateful. As strange as that sounds, because everybody wants to wait until they're ready to have kids, but I honestly, I don't never think that people will ever be ready to have the children that they want to have. But I think Isaac was my blessing. He was just like my answer from God. I just needed to calm down, I guess, and the way I was being so promiscuous, it was probably the best thing that happened to me. And I joke about it now, because, everybody will ask you like, oh, was it a mistake? Was it a mistake? And my response to that is, no, it was a surprise. I was surprised about it, but everybody likes surprises. So Isaac was my surprise. And it's almost like I learned, which is why I think now, Isaac's about to be 15 years old and I have a 3-year-old. So I really learned my lesson because I waited so long to have another child. I just wasn't ready to be a mom again. But, Isaac was born, and I remember, and this was right before Isaac was born. I think I was about 16 years old when this happened. That cousin moved back in, or he moved with us to our house, and I remember I don't know if it was my grandmother that was really sick or somebody in the family was sick. And my parents, my mom and dad, both left to Guatemala. And when you go out of the country, you can't go for a weekend. You have to go for a long period of time. So I remember them being gone for about a month. They left for a whole entire month. They left my cousin that had molested me or raped me when I was younger to be in charge of us. And I was already sexually active by then. I had a pretty steady boyfriend who happens to be Isaac's father. And
it's almost like my cousin knew that I was sexually active with him. He never caught me, or he just didn't know, but maybe it was the way we were around each other, maybe the way we acted around him, and he didn't like it. He really didn't like it. But I remember my cousin coming up to me and pinning me against the wall. And we had never discussed anything from what had happened when I was younger. And in the back of my mind, I almost thought like, well, maybe I made it up. Well, maybe it really didn't happen, because nobody ever really acknowledged it. Me and him never talked about it. He knew I hated him, but he never brought it up. It was almost like as if we swept it under the rug, and I moved on, he moved on, and that was the end of that. But I remember being 16 years old and him pinning me against the wall and saying something to the effect, he only spoke Spanish. And he said something to the effect of, about me being sexually active with my boyfriend. And he saw it. And he said something like, I'm going to show you what I should have showed you those years ago, and try to do it again. But I'm very, very grateful that I was a lot older, a lot stronger, because I was able to push him off, push my attacker off of me, and I remember leaving, and I wouldn't come home, and my parents, they came home from the airport. They were upset that I had left the house without their approval, their permission, and they finally came and got me, and my cousin was gone. He had left. So I finally said, okay, I'm going to tell him. So I remember having the conversation with my parents and telling them what happened when I was younger, and my mom was crying, and they were both very, I guess, in awe. Like they couldn't understand why I held it in for so long. They don't know, where did we go wrong? Were we not watching her? And my dad, I think if my dad could have killed somebody that day, he probably would have. They kicked my cousin out, and, my mom had this idea that, and I'm 16, you listen to your parents, but she thought that maybe if we confronted my attacker, I don't know if she thought it would make it go away. Maybe she thought it was therapeutic for me to point the finger at him and say, hey, you did this to me when I was younger, and you try to do it again. And a couple of days later, my cousin came, and my mom and dad were in the room. We were in the living room. And I remember telling him what he did to me when I was younger. And of course, he denied the whole thing, saying I'm crazy and I'm just a spoiled brat. And, and that was the end of that. My cousin moved out, and I never saw him again. Part of the problem in my family, I'm not saying everybody's family has the same problems, but in my family, from my mother's side, my father's side, is we don't talk about the problem. We act like if we don't talk about it, it doesn't happen, or it never happened. We act like this is something new that Sylvia's the only one that was tainted. No, it doesn't ever happen to anybody else. But when you actually start talking about it with your cousins, with your aunts, you see that it's very, very common in my family. As a matter of fact, I have an uncle, one of my mother's brothers, that's actually in prison for the exact same reason. We've had this conversation before. I don't blame my mom. Things happen for a reason, whether they needed to happen to make me to the person that I am today. And my mom knows that, but I think part of her feels that guilt that, I feel bad that she feels that way. I really do. Because I'm a mom myself, and I would never want to put my children in harm's way ever. Though that's my life right there. And I think that to me seems to be the biggest problem, because if we ignore it, it's not going to go away. I really wish that some of, I guess, accountability for your actions, getting some sort of, and I hate using the word punishment, but, just knowing that it's not okay for you to do that, wishing that I had somebody to advocate for me when I was younger, somebody that would have stood up for me, somebody that would have said, that's not okay, and, maybe if he would have been accountable for his actions, I don't know if he had any other I guess anybody else that was a victim to what he did to me. I don't know, and I wish that I wouldn't have waited until I got this old to say something to my family. I waited a long time to talk about it within my family. And to be perfectly honest, I don't know that despite the fact that I shared it with my mom and dad, I don't know that if it ever got outside of just that little room. I don't know if my mom ever told her sister, this is what your son did. I don't know if that ever came to terms with the rest of my family. And I really don't think it did. I don't think my family ever knows that it happened. And part of me feels that, what if something like that happened to him as well? By an uncle, by an aunt, I don't know. Children don't just make stuff like this up. And I didn't deal with it up until I actually became an adult. And even in my marriage, I always thought something was wrong with my husband. My husband's very patient, he really is. But I always felt like, I don't know, like he was going to get tired of me. He was going to leave me one day, or he didn't love me enough if he didn't want to, be more romantically involved with me and more often. And it's not until now that I'm an adult that I realized that there was really nothing wrong with him. It was me. I've been married for 10 years now. And it's not until now, it took me 10 years to figure out that sex is not just something you do. Sex is a special bond between a man and a woman. And somebody just took that from me. Part of, I guess, my background and my culture, some of the things that I feel makes us a little bit more vulnerable is because we do come from very large families. Like I shared with you earlier, I'm one of 7 siblings, and that's not that many. My mother is one of 21. So they're accustomed to having multiple children. But what makes us a little bit more vulnerable is that there is so many of us under one roof. That sometimes, since we don't have that conversation, we don't talk about sexual abuse, it makes us more vulnerable when we have those teenage kids or those hormonal adults that may have a sexual addiction or may be going through some struggles within their own families, kind of lash out at the younger kids that are the vulnerable ones that don't know the difference, really don't know what's going on. Another part in my culture is that women they're supposed to be very submissive towards their husbands. You do whatever it is that you're told. That's just the way that I was raised. You're here to serve your husband. So sometimes, whether the women agree with the situation or not, I feel that some of them may not have a saying in it. This is what's going to happen, and this is, what may go on. And even if you have that mom feeling inside of you, I mean, do you talk to your husband about it? Sometimes, those are conversations that are kind of just swept under the rug. One of the things that I worry more about my culture is, I don't know that they talk about sex with children in elementary school. I don't think that they have a sexual, hey, if this happens to you, this is what you should do about it. Sex is not appreciated as much as it should be. Sex in my culture is more for having more children, more for pleasing your husband, instead of it being more about the intimacy between a man and a woman and because you love each other. And that, to me, is how I feel. It is very hard. It's not more for your pleasure as a female. It's more because that's your job. That's your chore. It's like cleaning the house. It's another thing that you do. And to me, I think if it wasn't for me moving to the United States and becoming very Americanized, I probably would feel the same way as any other Hispanic female will. It's something that's very private to me that I'm making public. And I guess if I can share anything with either survivors or
people, even abusers. I want them to know that, parents are watching out for their children out there. And more importantly for me, my life has forever been changed because of something that happened to me at a very young age. And wanting for people to understand that it is not okay. It's never going to be okay. And we will advocate for our children. This is our future, and this is our jobs as parents, and my job as a Christian is not only to make sure that my children are okay, but also that my community is safe. My job really is to serve my community and to serve my Lord, and in order to do that, I'm going to continue to advocate for those young children that sometimes may not have a voice of their own. And for those people that are survivors, just, you sharing something that's this private to you can make a huge impact in what can happen in the long run, and somebody else that may be going through the same thing.